All righty. Good evening, everyone. I want to thank all of you for joining us this evening. I don't think I see any of my colleagues on yet, but we'll hop straight into business tonight so we can get to questions, because I think we have a loaded agenda tonight. I want to thank all of our chairs for joining us from all of our community boards here tonight. All righty, and I'm going to hop right into it. On Friday, March 5th, Mayor Bill de Blasio announced the next phase of the city's police reform and reinvention collaborative draft plan. The police reform consists of 36 reforms that can be broken down into 5 different categories: transparency and accountability, community representation, recognition of racialized policing, decriminalization of poverty, and a diverse, resilient, and supportive NYPD. We now passed the deadline for recommendations for the reform plan, as the mayor's office had a deadline of April 1st to send the plan to the state. Today, we are joined by several individuals, and I think I'll start with saying we're joined by the police commissioner tonight. I believe we're also joined by Jamila Pringle Fines, who will give us an update on the report on the finalized plan as well. And she's the Assistant Commissioner for the New York City Office of the Mayor, Assistant Commissioner for the New York City Office of the Mayor. In addition, the New York City Department of City Planning and the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, the MTA, will deliver a presentation on Elevate Transit, zoning for accessibility, a proposed citywide zoning text amendment that would allow the MTA to work more efficiently with private developers to better achieve accessibility throughout the transit system for people with disabilities. The presentation will provide details on the proposal and how it would work to increase opportunities to create accessible transit stations in Queens. Tonight, we have several participants from the DCP and the MTA, and we'll go to them after our presentation with the police commissioner as well. So I want to welcome everybody. For those of you who are tuning in, I'm Queens Borough President Donovan Richards, and I guess I am now handing this thing over to our police commissioner to take over. I want to thank you. It's good to see you, Dermot. I heard you miss me being in the city council, but great to see you here tonight. Feels like old times a little bit.
I don't miss you. I actually don't miss you at all.
Well, you came tonight, so you missed me a little bit.
I miss Queens, and it's great to be here. And honestly, thank you for the invitation to speak to the great people of Queens tonight. And I look forward to a lively discussion. I will just say that you brought up the conversation earlier about the reform initiative. I think it's a great topic to touch on that. We can touch on quality of life. We can touch on crime or any other issues that people are, I know, concerned about, because being around New York City, I know these things come up quite frequently. I think as I look around, I see a couple friendly faces up on the Zoom to my left here. It's about working together and rolling up our sleeves and really addressing some of these issues that the city is facing. It has clearly been a tough year for everyone. When you look back at last year with COVID, into the terrible tragedy of George Floyd, as the murder trial is now winding down, at the same time that we look for optimism as vaccines are out, we also are not done yet with reforming and not losing our sight on also trying to keep crime in check. So there is truly, Mr. Borough President, quite a bit going on. I can tell you that we have, as has been reported, struggled with gun violence across New York City. I'm sure that topic is going to come up. In Queens, particularly the 114 precinct, whether it's Queensbridge and Astoria, in that particular area, that is one precinct that really comes to mind. I don't know if there's a representative from the Queens District Attorney's Office on, but I could tell you that members of our Detective Bureau, under now Jimmy Essick and formerly Rodney Harrison, and members of our patrol force and housing authority police are acutely aware of the gun violence citywide, but also in Queens, and are doing everything that we can out there each and every day to, number one, get guns off the street, number two, work with the community, because we know that it's not a police-only issue. And, hopefully things are going to turn around real soon.
And let me just add, just touch on Queens a little bit, because there has been some, I mean, based on your numbers, some success in Queens so far this year. I think we've seen, some significant drops in some of the major 7 categorical areas. So I don't want you to just give the gloom and, doom scenario as well, but to speak on where we're at in Queens. And if you don't have those numbers, it's fine. We could go through the presentation, but it's something that obviously from my interest, I continuously follow, on a weekly basis, looking at the numbers. So without a doubt, we're still struggling in the areas of murders. But I think we've seen some success this year as well, across the board in Queens thus far. Not saying we're out of the woods. A lot.
Yeah, I'll be honest, because I like to be a straight shooter. I think you have to really be careful with any of these statistics that you see. Okay. And I say that for a very good reason, because if you think back to what we are now, for example, right now we're comparing against last year.
Right.
And we all remember what last year was like. Last year, New York City had just made a decision to lock down. We closed our schools. We closed, mass transit was basically empty, with ridership down 90%. The businesses were closed. So the honest truth is, Donovan, there's a big asterisk next to a lot of these crime statistics.
Got it. And we're also joined, let me just acknowledge, we're joined by the chairwoman of the Public Safety Committee in the City Council, Councilwoman Adrienne Adams. We're joined by Council Members Koo and also Councilmember Danique Miller as well, and Councilmember, newly elected Councilmember Gennaro, who I think this is his first Borough Board meeting, so welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Borough President.
So Dermot, you want to continue to run through some things, or you want us to open up for questions, or we're going to go through this presentation?
I think it's well known, in terms of the picture of crime right now in New York City. From a 30,000 foot view, the gun violence is first and foremost what we are concerned about. And that's not to minimize anything else. We are certainly very concerned about some of the incidents of hate crime that we've seen across the city, most recently targeting members of the Asian community. They're in Flushing, whether it's in Flushing, Chinatown, or in Sunset Park in Brooklyn. We are very concerned about that. I could tell you that what we have done under Chief of Department now, Rodney Harrison's leadership, the Hate Crimes Task Force, investigating these crimes after the fact, but we also want to prevent these crimes. So we put significant resources out where we can in terms of into some of these communities where we've seen some of these crimes take place. This is uniform presence. We've also gone the extra step and taken some of the undercover officers that would ordinarily be working other cases. And quite frankly, I said there's nothing more important than this right now. So we have undercover Asian officers deployed throughout New York City. And I was on TV this weekend saying that twice in the last week, we've had undercover officers now on scene, either witnessing a hate crime or themselves being the victim of a hate crime and immediately making arrests. And the comment I made on the news when we announced this was, if you're thinking about doing this to an innocent New Yorker, think twice, because the next person you target may be an undercover police officer. I wanted that deterrent effect. The reality is, though, I think that if we really take a hard look at this, we're seeing quite a bit of mental illness. And I don't know how much really that is deterring when you're thinking about the mental illness aspect of this, that is also, quite clearly a part of what we're seeing right now. So the hate crimes are certainly important. The gun violence is certainly important. On a good news, you mentioned good news. We do have 1,800 police officers in the academy right now. The first 900 or roughly 800 and change of them are due to get out next month, and then they'll start their field training. But that's supposed to take place sometime in early to mid-May when they will be getting out of the academy. So those are much, much needed reinforcements because we are dealing with a significantly reduced patrol force.
Okay. All right, so I'm gonna open it up now for a question to the commissioner because I do want to get to Jamila as well.
Yep.
So if you have a question, please use the raise hand function and we'll take it from there. Any chairs have questions? Don't be shy. None of y'all have questions?
As the questions are coming in, let me just talk about if it'll maybe spur something. The George Floyd trial that's on now, just to put hopefully some residents at ease. We are certainly watching the trial closely. We are monitoring with police and our intel division authorities out in Minneapolis for whatever the outcome of that trial will be. As I've said publicly, hopefully justice is served. It's impossible to know what the exact outcome is going to be. So we're looking at a range going from, guilty to not guilty. But even if it's guilty, guilty of what? We're hoping for calm and peace. And we would, again, ask all New Yorkers, whatever the outcome of that trial is. And again, hopefully justice is served. But whatever the outcome of that trial is, that if there is a situation where there is going to be protests or things of that nature, that we all agree that we just want to do it calmly and peacefully with no injuries, no property damage. We are going to be mobilizing to have at the ready. We've already been drilling large numbers of police officers. And again, hopefully they're not needed at all. And if they are needed, hopefully it's just to allow people to come out and protest peacefully. And I am confident that that's what's going to happen.
Let me just pivot before we get to you on some other things. So we've been reading these stories about no-knock warrants the last few days. Specifically, I think one case in Far Rockaway. I think another case might have been, couldn't catch the neighborhood, might have been Cambria or even my neighborhood, Rosedale or Laurelton or St. Albans. Can you speak to what we're doing to make sure that we don't see these incidents continue to pop up across the borough? Because it seemed like I've seen 2 or 3 stories written the last few days.
Yeah, I actually have a lot to say on that. Number one, I would say that to any specific case, I'm not going to comment because if there's active litigation. But, there's always a version of what you read in the paper. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's the accurate version in terms of whether those were, in fact, right apartments, wrong apartments. We have a very stringent process already regarding warrants. Once probable cause is established, it's reviewed, multiple levels of supervision. It'll go up to the chief level, Donovan, to get signed off on. And this is all occurring after due diligence, background checks, evidence is collected. All the way up to the chief level, signed off. This is before it leaves this police department. Once that all does occur, then we will make an application to the local district attorney's office, who will then review all the evidence. And if they concur, it will be then presented to a judge who will ultimately sign off on it, giving us the legal authority to enter into a residence. As part of that application process, there will be a decision made, whether it's quote unquote, as you see, no knock or not. And really what that applies to is it's giving you the authority under certain hours to go into a residence to retrieve evidence. It could be evidence of pornography. It could be computers. It could be clothing worn, blood matter. It could be a crime scene where we need a search warrant to go in. Most frequently in New York City, what we are obtaining warrants for is drugs and firearms. I mean, that's the general. And then depending on the circumstances, a decision will be made to apply for a no-knock or not. The most frequent uses of no-knock are those latter categories, when it's evidence that can be destroyed or firearms that can be used to hurt the officers that are making the entry into the location. So that's where we stand with no-knock. I think that many find when they review our policies in terms of what we have done, we are not perfect. We have made mistakes in the past. I can think back about maybe 10 years ago with an incident where we really it could be even more than that, actually, where we overhauled and strengthened our process, how we review these things. And that was a case in Manhattan North where a warrant was executed, and we felt, we could have done a better job. Again, that was over 10 years ago. So the positioning of our application process now, I think in line of other police departments across the country, is quite strong. I think other police departments look to how we have these policies in place when they look to replicate them. And again, to an individual case in the news, I wouldn't believe everything you read in the paper.
Well, I will let the chair of the Public Safety Committee take that up with you, but I certainly just wanted to let you know we're watching that very closely. And I'm gonna, because I want to get to everybody, we have a long presentation. I'm gonna go to first, I'm gonna alternate between the chairs and then council members who have questions or comments or concerns. So I'm gonna go to CB12 first, Princess Thorbs McGee, and then following her, Councilmember Idenique Miller. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Reverend Princess Thorbs McGee from Community Board 12. And thank you for coming to this meeting, Commissioner. One of the issues that we're having in Community Board 12, which also covers the 113th precinct and the 103 precinct, is quality of life.
Yeah.
I'm hearing complaints and getting complaints out of the 113, not so much out of the 103, because I live in the 113, of having officers follow through and take reports. They're being told to go to 1PP to go file a report, which you and I both know is not, unless policing has changed, is not the correct protocol. In the 103, we're having the issue of, because of the shelters, we're having a lot of loitering taking place. If the laws have changed with loitering, could the community please be advised of that? And then what steps can we take and what steps should the officers be taking? Isn't that considered trespassing at some point, especially when it comes to businesses? On Parsons Boulevard, there, right there by the train station, there are businesses who are in dire straits, and they're considering closing and leaving Jamaica Avenue because they cannot deal any longer with the gentlemen who are selling weed there and in their stores.
Yeah, so Princess, you mentioned quite a bit there. I'm going to try to tackle them all, and you can jump on back if I forget to address anyone in particular. The quality of life is still what I hear most going around the city, and it doesn't really matter what neighborhood it is or what borough it is. Regarding, if I'm hearing you right, and I think I am, one of the complaints in the 113 and the 103 was about, is it shelters or temporary shelters in hotels?
Yes.
We hear that I've heard that also around Queensbridge. I've heard that in certainly Manhattan. We've heard it in Brooklyn. That is something that many communities are being very vocal about right now, as everyone deals with the confluence, I would say, of homelessness, COVID, and moving people out of shelters. That's a tough one, and that's not one that's going to be solved by the police. What I could tell you is when it does become a police matter is when they are outside and then committing crimes or other quality of life issues. The loitering piece first. Well, my lawyerly answer would be, it depends. Certain parts of the loitering provision were deemed unconstitutional to enforce, such as being in, the Port Authority or transportation hubs, or there are parts of that law that were struck down years ago by the Supreme Court. So the cops are not able to enforce people just hanging out. It really comes down to what else they are doing. You mentioned marijuana. That was a law that was just recently passed, where marijuana has now been legalized. We're struggling as an agency on how we communicate that to the public, how we deal with 9/11 calls that are still coming in for marijuana, and basically telling the people that it is now legal. That is something that I think as time goes on, people are going to get more used to, whether they like it or not. But right now, it is certainly a major adjustment for all of us. The one thing I did not like that you said, Princess, is that you were told at some point in time to go to One Police Plaza or report it to there. I would need a little more information on that one in terms of, what was being complained about. Certainly, that should never be the answer. So that's the easy response there. I know that the chair is on, Adrian Adams, and her and I have spoken on this topic a couple times, specifically about, how the police have relationships or don't with the communities that they serve. One of the things that we put into place, I put into place last September, was trying to change the mindset of the police that I think at times is very good, at times needs some improvement in how we deal with the public. So we rolled out an initiative this year, customer service, and we rolled it out in one precinct in Harlem, and we rolled it out, it was either in the 103 or the 113. I think it was the 113. Signs put up everywhere, and when people walked into the 113 precinct, there was basically a barcode where you would pull out your phone, scan it, and you could complete a survey when you went home. How were you treated when you went to the precinct? How do you think the customer service was? How long did you have to wait? Were you given good information? Since rolling that out into those two precincts, we have now rolled it out citywide, 77 precincts. It's still early, but we think that this is something that we can build upon, and we're starting to collect data on this. And I think that the NYPD is leading on this. I think it's something that every city agency should do in terms of remembering who the public is, and that we work for the public, and that we have an opportunity to really, treat them as customers. And that's how we're kind of approaching this. So, if you're complaining about something and they're saying, well, go tell One Police Plaza, then that's wrong. I'd like some more information on that, and I apologize that it ever happened. But the quality of life you hit on the head, Princess. It's illegal while marijuana is now legal to possess, unless you're under 21 in some other circumstances. This is very new for all New Yorkers, and there's going to be an adjustment period. It's certainly not okay for somebody to sell marijuana in somebody's bodega, for example. There are things that we can still do to address if that's happening. But quality of life in general remains something that is very important to all New Yorkers, and the police are committed to addressing it. We do need at times some tools to help us in that endeavor, but it remains something that we are 100% committed to. And the reason is simple. Number one, because we work for the people in New York City. Number two, we know that when we don't pay attention to some of these smaller quality of life things, we're going to be coming back to that scene later on, and it unfortunately is probably going to be for a more serious crime. So it's something that we pay real close attention to.
One other.
No, I got to move on. And
right.
I'm going to ask everybody to get, ask one question, very, succinct and straightforward, so we can, because I got to get to presentations. So one question. All right, Councilmember Miller.
Hey, and happy birthday, young brother.
Thank you.
Happy belated to you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
I'm not going to take any time because the PC and I have been talking nearly daily over the past couple of weeks on the things that are happening. One of the things, and Princess did nail it in terms of quality of life, the low-hanging fruit. Let's take advantage of the things that we can control, the things that we can control. And I think that's where we garner a lot of the civic support from. But I am concerned about redeployment of resources and workforce and what that looks like in this moment. There's a lot of things happening throughout the city, and that Queens South, may have to redeploy some of its workforce to other places in the city. But as you just mentioned, that we're all tight in doing so. And I just do want to reiterate that we came out of a space in the downtown Jamaica area, which Princess was just mentioning, where a lot of new policies, whether it was the budget, whether it was bail reform or something else, that was being blamed for the increase, the tick in crime. But what we've been seeing in terms of quality of life that has been escalated into crimes in that area has been occurring for more than 5 years. It's not a recent phenomenon. So we want to address that, but we want to also make sure that we are not losing our workforce to other parts of the city or not being prioritized because we don't have, the major crimes occurring in those areas. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, the last thing we want to do is strip one part of the city and move it to wherever a protest is happening and then have, problems in that place that we took the resources out of. What we are really trying to do here is maintain the patrol strength equally throughout the city and really trying to fund the majority of these protests that we may have to stand up and it may not even come to it with any of the inside people, Danique, that we can, because we know that whether it's Queens, whether it's, Astoria, Jackson Heights, Corona or Jamaica, we don't want to be taking cops out of those areas because the communities need them. And we know that. We take a look at all of these factors, including calls for service, calls to 9/11 that come in. And Queens also has their own protests, and almost every one of them is extremely peaceful and very cooperative with the police. So the idea here is absolutely not to pull resources out and then create additional problems. We're going to try to fund this all with, some of the supplementary staffs that we have, some of the units that are doing casework or things of that nature, and we'll make decisions as we have. But, I think we all know that we are under the gun with the budget for the last 12 months or so. If you follow in the paper, it has been a bit of a rock Peter to pay Paul. So when you see, the transit, we have a flux to put in 500 additional officers into the transit system. We were able to do that. But it's been challenging, but I can tell you that I'm incredibly proud of the leaders of this agency that have risen to the challenge and really managed this agency in pretty difficult times. And we continue to do exactly just that. So we will not forget Queens.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to move now. And it was also my anniversary as well. So I just want to acknowledge that. So the First Lady, now what? You just took a happy birthday and not an anniversary. And I was born for her. So that's why I married her on my birthday. It wasn't because I thought I would forget our anniversary date. I want to also acknowledge we've been joined by Sylvina Brooks and also Francisco Moya as well. All right, I'm going to now go to, and I know we're going to have a presentation too. I'm going to now go to CB Chair Marie Torniali, CB1, then to Lisa Deller, and then we have two more questions. Oh, shoot, a lot of questions. Okay, if we can really keep them succinct so we can get through the presentation, that would be helpful so we can all be off of this before midnight. All righty.
Okay, happy anniversary. I'll say it for all of us. Borough President, thank you. And thank you, Commissioner Shea, for being here. As you mentioned, CB1 has seen a rise in gun violence. Just at the Woodside campus, we had 3 shootings, 2 resulting in murder, one of a young mother coming home from the store. And what is I just want to know what the NYPD's vision of preventing gun violence so we don't have these instances that are just tragic in our neighborhood.
Yeah, that was, every loss of life is terrible. That was a horrible, horrible incident where we made the first arrest on it, but my heart really goes out to that family. Gun violence is, we take all crime seriously, but gun violence is at the top. And because there's no second chances when we have these incidents. And it is really having a dramatic impact on the victims' lives. it has an impact on the offender's family too, as well, when we're ripping people out of the community and now sending them to prison. I mean, there's nothing good that comes out of this. That's why we invest so heavily at the beginning. When I became PC, I wanted to double down on the amount of resources that we put into working with kids. I'm incredibly proud of that, but that's a long-term vision too, where we have youth officers in every precinct and youth coordination officers in every precinct working with kids and giving them outlets. I can tell you that next month we are going to begin a process of about 2 months where we're going to be opening up facilities, activating spaces, we like to call it, whether it's basketball courts, fields, working with other agencies in New York City and the mayor's office to have these staffed to give kids things to do. So when you talk about gun violence, it's not just cops running around making gun arrests, which we are doing at a very quick pace, up 60% for the year in gun arrests. It's multifaceted. It's attacking the gun stream that comes from the South and doing cases. It's focusing on people that are carrying guns and pulling the trigger with our district attorney partners and building really strong cases to get those individuals off the street. But it's not just with a wide net, which historically has gotten us into some trouble. It's really doing it with precision and reducing incarceration, but making the streets safer. That's where we were just a couple of years ago, and we got to get back there as quickly as possible. But nothing is more important to us than focusing on people carrying guns. And when you talk about everything that's said in the last 12 months and you hear all these things about defund, this is where, you need to have these hard conversations. Because I don't get upset when I hear defund, as long as it means, reinvesting in communities and putting more money into schools and putting more money into programs. I think we got to do all that. And we have to fund our police departments and work together collaboratively and have all these tough decisions. It can't be like the police trying to target gun violence here, because if you just look at one piece of this spectrum, you're really gonna, I think we do a very good job. And I think that, we have some obstacles the last couple of years, but if you really want to attack this right, you have to look at the whole thing. When I see Queens, I want to see every park open this summer with a cop so kids can go out and play. That's crime fighting. So it's all of these things done holistically. I think the NYPD is at the forefront of it. I think we're a huge driving force behind this, but I think we got to do it with all of our other partners. And I know Donovan says, be quiet, be quick. I'm never quick, Donovan.
I know.
When we did the graffiti cleanup this weekend, that's combating gun violence. That's developing relationships with kids in the neighborhoods that were out there cleaning graffiti with us, building trust, getting to know your cops. It's all part of a kind of big strategy.
Thank you. And also, Marie, we've been working very closely with the mayor's office, and we'll be making some announcements on expanding the crisis management system, our cure violence programs out into both Woodside houses in Astoria. So it's something I've been working on the mayor with, and he's given us the green light on it, and we're working through, more of the finite details of the who, what, when, where, when that will arrive. But that program will now be enacted in both of those communities. So
Thank you.
So thank you for your, all right. So we're gonna now go to, in commission, I'm gonna ask you to be as brief as possible in your answers. I'm now going to go to Lisa Deller, and also following her, Chair Lisa Deller, and then Chair Renetta English from CB3.
Thank you, Borough President. Happy birthday. I would like, hopefully this is a quick question, but first I would like to acknowledge our new captain, Lavonda Wise, who is very collaborative and has been to our community board, has assigned people to go to some of our committee meetings. And so I really want to, we're really pleased with her performance to date.
Thank you.
The question is about drag racing. There's been a lot of drag racing in our community, particularly on Van Dam Street and Northern Boulevard, which is, adjacent to CB1. And I just want to ask, what are you doing? And is there a way of working with the Department of Transportation to control kind of signalization on some of those streets?
Yeah, I think we have to do more. And thank you for the comments about the commanding officer. She's doing a great job there. You know, a couple complaints that we're getting more often, we get the complaint about quads, dirt bikes, motorcycles running through different streets of Manhattan in packs. I would put this one with the drag racing. I don't know if you're talking about cars or both.
Both.
We have to do a better job. The key is we have to do it safely so that we're not chasing people. We do not want to have a situation where we're chasing cars and now an innocent car or pedestrian gets hit. So I will talk to Juanita Holmes on this and, you know, filter it down through the CO. We'll try to put a more succinct plan in place, maybe working with some of our partners, maybe even the state police who are assigned at times here, that we can do things safely and discourage this behavior, because we know that it goes on at times throughout New York City. And it's really, we know it's a noise issue. We know it's a safety issue. And, you know, we'll do everything we can to discourage it, whether that's through education, summonses, or both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're gonna go to Renetta English, Chair of CB3.
Hello, Borough President Richards. Happy birthday and happy anniversary.
Thank you.
And hello, Police Commissioner. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Community Board 3 covers East Elmhurst, Jackson Heights, and North Corona. And I recently heard that Deputy Inspector Durant, he's retiring. Do you know who will be assigned to us yet?
I do no decisions, but the good news is we've announced recently that we are putting a process into place so that the community is going to be a part of that decision. So, you know, I announced that a couple months ago. I think it's, you know, it was met with some skepticism from some, but I look at it as follows. The short answer is, you know, when you become a precinct CO, and I ran 2 precincts, you know very quickly that it is, number one, a full-time job, and that you are married to the community. You may as well start that marriage at the earliest possible time. So we're going to have a process in place now where a few key people are going to sit in and be brought into that process of, you know, and it's almost like an interview where, hey, why do you want to, you know, serve this community? What do you know about the community? What do you bring to the community? What are your ideas on quality of life, serving the public, working with the youth, fighting crime? So you'll hear more coming up on that.
Wonderful. And the Community Board would definitely like to be part of that process.
And let me announce also the borough presidents will have, I think there'll be committees and we'll have selections as well. And I think community boards will also play a role, which was something that was important to many of the borough presidents as well, who will play a part in this process. So look forward to more.
Thank you so much.
On that. All right, thank you. I want to go to Betty. Actually, I said I was gonna. So I'm going to go to Chair Adams, and then following Adams, Betty Brayton.
Thank you, Queens Borough President. Happy birthday, happy anniversary to you. Commissioner, it's good to see you. We see each other quite a bit. It's good to see you. And thank you for joining this important meeting with Queens. I just wanted to reiterate that recruiting is still a priority when it comes to NYPD. So, and just to let everyone know that my office is, I just found out a couple of hours ago that my office is actually responsible for the police officer exam tutorial, a spot located with our wonderful Thomas White Jr. Foundation. Located in my District 28, they're on Tuskegee Airmen Way. So we are actually going to be assisting in getting help to recruit, particularly those of color of interest in joining the force. So we will be assisting in the location for those tutorials in District 28. So I just wanted to give a quick commercial for that. So that's it.
If I could echo just everyone on this call, please, if you know of anyone that even remotely considered wanting to be a police officer, even if they don't, right now from April 7th to April 27th, it's only 20 days, they have to go to nypdrecruit.com, follow the link, and they can sign up to take the test. If they don't sign up right now, they can't take the test in June. So we're really trying to push this. Chair Adams mentioned minority recruitment. I have 5 days of data that has just come in. It's really early. I pushed my people to let's really boost that enrollment. And so far, so good, but I don't want to jinx myself. So we only have until the 27th. Your family members, people that go to church with you, your grandson, kids, anyone, just tell them to sign up and keep their options open. Thank you.
Go to Chair Brayton, CB10.
Thank you, Mr. Borough President. Happy birthday, happy anniversary. One of the downsides of being around as long as me is experience. One of the upsides of being around as long as me is experience. Commissioner, just to put that into a little bit of context, I grew up with the father of my precinct commander, and his grandfather was a friend of my father's. I was around and active in Queens civics during the 70s. I was on the community board in the 70s. I've been a precinct council officer, every officer in my council. One of the things that I see happening now, and I'm just jumping on what Council Member Miller said and what the chair of Ward 12 said, the quality of life issues. In the bad old days, we let them get totally out of hand. That led us into the years when crime was all that was getting paid attention to. And there was a great deal of overkill in the fighting of crime, which led to a lot of, and it's not the total reason, there are many, many other reasons as well, and the report goes into them, to the situation that we are facing now. We need to get back to quality of life enforcement. We certainly need to do it fairly. We certainly need to do it across the board, all across the city, the same, not always the same way, but fairly and consistently all across the city. Because what we saw happening last summer, and it's fully understandable within the context of the pandemic, almost getting a Wild West atmosphere out there where anything goes. People were picking and choosing whatever laws they're going to obey. We need to get that back, or we're going to be back in the bad old times again. And I'd like you to address the quality of life issues this year and going forward in a much stronger way, because no matter where we go in the community, although there's crime, we hear about it. People are concerned with crime, but what they complain about at meetings is quality of life.
Thank you. Thank you, Betty. I'm now going to move over to CB4, Marilena Giampino.
Hi, yes, thank you so much, Borough President. And thank you, Commissioner, for being on tonight. I just want to make a quick question. CB4, my district represents Elmhurst and Corona. And just to bring up something that no one has brought up yet, we do have some issues with gang issues. It's gotten a little bit worse since the pandemic. And I don't want to go into any details, but is there anything being done currently relating to tackling gang issues, especially in our district?
Yeah, when you look at the 110 and the 115, and I know it like the back of my hand because my aunt grew up on Ithaca Street, so I know Elmhurst Avenue and that whole area and very, very well as a kid growing up in Sunnyside. When you look at the gang issues that we're facing, and you're right, we had that multiple people stabbed last week, which was a gang-related incident right there. It is something that we remain focused on combating. I can tell you that the Queens District Attorney and myself and our teams have met a number of times in an ongoing basis to speak specifically about violence in Queens. I can tell you that there is going to be some good fruits of the labor that we have put in over the last couple of months coming soon in Queens, but it's not going to be the whole thing. We're going to still have some work to do. And I would go back to the earlier thing that I said. Some of it is going to be old-fashioned police work. Some of it is building cases on people that, quite frankly, need to go to jail. But just as much of it is about resources, funding, keeping people out of trouble so that they never have to go to jail, and working with communities, whether it's grassroots organizations, elected officials, whether it's cure violence type organizations and neighborhood police officers to really, to the prior question, strike that balance. We need enforcement at times, but we also need to be sensitive to not too much enforcement. So all of this is what's in front of us. We're aware of it, and we are certainly aware of some of the gang challenges here in Queens. Really, unfortunately, this is a problem that we are seeing in all 5 boroughs in New York City.
Thank you.
I talked about the Cure Violence program. That is a program that I believe really, I mean, we just celebrated, I think, a little bit over, and it doesn't get press, Police Commissioner Shea. In Redfern House is probably one of the most challenging developments probably in Queens at one point. Sylvina Brooks Powers and myself just celebrated, I think it was over 150 days or something, or no shootings there. So it shows when PD works in coordination with the NCO officers, but when you also putting those resources into local communities that you can bring the numbers down. So just wanted to point that out. There's no one solution. It's a culmination of things that has to happen to bring crime down, as the commissioner alluded to. Last question, we're gonna go to Chair Brian Block, CB13. Unmute yourself, all right.
I got it, all right. Thank you, Mr. Borough President. Happy birthday, happy anniversary. Commissioner, I just want to piggyback, I believe, on what Betty Bratton was saying, the quality of life issues that must be addressed. I'm here at, I'm at 105 precinct with Captain Igor, and he's doing a great job. Picasso, yeah. So, but just regarding, I'd be remiss if I don't bring it up. I don't know what your answer is going to be, but my board would kill me if I don't bring it up. Our quality of life with regards to the trucks in our district. We're just oversaturated with trucks, and the issues that we don't have a place, even if 105 tows them, there's no place to put them. It's like a quality of life issue. And I just wanted to bring it to your attention. And then also the reform issue about, I believe they're going to be making it mandatory for new officers to live within the 5 boroughs. Am I right or wrong? Is that part of the new reform?
No, you're wrong on that. I mean, you're not wrong, but that's not accurate. There was a recommendation made for the state to consider that. That would have to be a law that was passed at the state level. It's not easy to do. It would probably get some pretty strong opposition, but it's being considered.
But I had met you at Allen AME at a meeting that was there, and I've always said that my position, at least for the first 5 years, whatever, an officer coming out of the academy should live within the 5 boroughs. After that, they could go wherever they want to go. But I just feel strongly that if they live within our community, like I used to have 2 cops living on my block, and we had no problems, you know, but it's just like, I really think they should live within the boroughs. And once again, also, I just want to finalize my comment is that I'm turning my nephew over to you guys at NYPD. He's going to take the exam. I'm really nervous, but he's taking the exam. You know, he said he wants to do it. He was an auxiliary officer at 105, so he's going to take the exam. He went and registered to take the exam. So if you're still there, take care of my guy, okay, if he gets in. All right. But I'm just concerned about my issue with quality of life on a serious note within the 105 and my community board. That's what we're concerned about. I'm just piggybacking on Betty Bratton.
No, I know that Betty is right. And I can tell you, you know, on the issue of trucks, I've heard Igor talking about this, and I know this is a big issue, particularly in some of these Queens neighborhoods. And what we try to tell our officers too is, you know, you're dealing with a lot of different factors and you're running from potentially job to job, but no job is more important than that job you're going to next to the person that's calling, whether it's 311 and 911. And that, again, it circles back to customer service and treating everyone and having the ability to impact on somebody's, you know, sleeping at night or quality of life. or public safety is a big responsibility. It's really an honor. So we are committed to the quality of life enforcement done right and fairly. We also need at times tools because, you know, Betty mentioned years ago, well, years ago isn't the case anymore because the rules have changed in many ways. So it's got to be, you know, a new playbook at times, and it's got to be done right and fairly. But we are absolutely committed to working with the people across the city.
Thank you.
All right, I want to thank you, Commissioner Shea, for joining us. And let me just add, I believe we should have purchased, I'm not sure if you ever did, and if you can give us a report on the heavy duty tow trucks. I had pushed then Commissioner O'Neill to purchase, I think, a few extra ones. I'm not sure if that ever happened. And also we were working on the mayor, with the mayor on a plan to revise their tow pound lot plan, right? So we have a tow pound in Springfield Gardens where majority of those cars are coming from probably Manhattan and Brooklyn. And it was an easy way to free up space by sending those cars somewhere else and freeing up some space for the trucks to actually get towed, you know, towards the airport. So that's not you, that's the mayor. But we would love a report on the heavy duty tow trucks.
Yeah, I have, that's one you stumped me. I don't know where that stands.
Okay.
The towing is, you know this probably too from your old job. You know, we just lost our tow facility in Manhattan, which is causing all sorts of logistical issues that we can overcome. But sometimes that's the problem with these towing. It's not actually towing the cars. It's where do we put them and where do we, and just as important is when somebody's car is towed, how far they have to go to get it back. Because a lot of times it's not these trucks we're talking about, but I can have somebody circle back with you and give you all that information.
Okay, great. Well, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. I also just want to, and you know, I will tell you, I always try to be fair. I will say I did a call with just about every NYCHA leader last week in conjunction with your commands out in Queens, and major kudos, big improvement in terms of communication at the NYCHA developments. So I just wanted to give that they all sang praises, and it wasn't that case when I was in the council, but certainly there's been a lot of progress made. So I just want to give you hats off on that, and we look forward
Maybe
to
you're getting better at communicating.
I'm gonna play nice on this line right now, but let me say this: we're appreciative of the relationship, and we know that there's still a lot more work to be done on both the reform side, but we also recognize the importance of continuing to build the bridges to make sure Queens is safer as well. So we look forward to accomplishing both with you as we move forward, and want to thank you for stopping in tonight.
Yeah, thank you. And let me just say, I'm jealous because I saw that I think everyone except me got to be on that Mets video where you said, "Let's go Mets." They never called me for that. And that's going to stick in my craw for a while. To everyone on this call, listen, just thank you for what
they want you to fix their quality of life issues before you get a video.
Thank everyone that's on this call for what you do. And, you know, we don't always agree. Donovan, we certainly haven't always agreed, but we always agree to work together, talk, and try to come to some solution. And we all love this city. So let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets. All right. Great seeing you, Commissioner.
Bye-bye.
All righty. Bye. All righty. We're now going to move on to our presentation. We are really behind, but thank you. Thank you. So we'll move on to the presentation now from Jamila.
Hi, hello. This is Jamila Fines, Assistant Commissioner with the Mayor's Community Affairs Unit. And I just want to quickly say the conversation with the Commissioner did cut into a lot of my time. So I'm going to be really brief with my presentation. But I just want to say that I do still thank you for allowing us to be here to just share some updates in regards to the reform that's been happening. So let me pull up into the document now, making sure everyone can see it. Okay. Is it visible?
Yes.
Okay.
You may want to maximize the page though.
Thank you. I'm still figuring out this technology. Let's see if
go up to your top corner next to your X, to your right. Yeah, right there. Boom.
Oh wait, no, I just minimized it. Let me try to.
It didn't do it,
Jamila, if you click on slideshow.
Ah, there we go. There we go. Thank you. Thank you for your help. We're still figuring out technology on my end. Okay. So I will say, I know the commissioner did delve a little bit already into the reform plan that was put together, community-driven plan that was put together by a lot of city agencies led by the deputy mayor's office. And we had a total of 85 meetings that were held by the collaborative itself. Which is noted here in this document. And we will make this document available for the Borough President's office just for you, just so you know, just for an FYI. A lot of the focus has been on transparency and accountability, as the commissioner did state, community representation and partnership, recognition and continual examination of the past and where we are going now in the present, the decriminalization of poverty, and a diverse, resilient, and supported NYPD. So that has been like a lot of the focus thus far. So far, in terms of what has been happening, there was a matrix that was put out by CCRB and NYPD. I know that everyone did see that. Also, there was
which was my law that they don't like.
Yes. Oh yeah. Apologies. You know, you gotta add in the positives, and it's your birthday, so we have to give you your flowers while you're here. Agreed. Yes, which the Borough President did really do a lot of work around, and we're very happy about his leadership around that. Also, the David Dinkins plan around strengthening the CCRB, which could always use more work, but this is just a start, I will say. Creating a citywide policy to strengthen transparency and accountability with the use of biometric technology. That has been a big thing that was brought up in a lot of conversations with community stakeholders. And then also body-worn cameras, which was part of ongoing conversations as well. Some more things that have been happening as of recent, you might have heard about the tripling of the city's cure violence workforce by 2022, which is something that was just discussed very briefly. The expansion of Community Solutions Program from the Brownsville pilot, which was actually a successful pilot that did take place, where community-based organizations really took leadership in trying to push for positive engagement and enhanced engagement within the community itself, in collaboration with NYPD, who took a little bit of a step back in that in that situation. Also, the elevating of the feedback of community through CompStat and enhanced neighborhood policing, ensuring the Special Victims Division is a model for the national best practice through an independent review, and also the improving of support for victims of domestic violence, gender-based and family violence through access to community-based resources. This is something that was definitely shown as a need, an enhanced need, especially during COVID, to us while we were engaging with the community the way we were. Something else that I will note also is the systematic examination of the end of policies that used to lead to the over-policing of low-income communities, developing more of a health-centered response to mental health crises. This was a big thing that was actually brought up by a lot of the electeds here in Queens too. So thank you for a lot of your input and insight and guidance on that. We do appreciate that, because we did get a little bit of kicks surrounding that. So I'm glad that we now have some things that we're working on in that regard. Also improving services for victims of domestic violence, as was mentioned before, working on strategies to combat trafficking, which was also mentioned as a priority, and working with the New York State to allow overdose prevention centers to pilot in New York City. So that's something else. And I am attempting to slide down. And sorry for going so fast. You all, I just have to quickly breeze through this so that maybe I could get at least one question in, and then I'll have to hop into another meeting. But I do appreciate your patience, and I'm always open to coming back to give you more.
Could come back if you want to come back, so everybody can digest this, because I know we had the commissioner today as well. So.
Yeah, I know I can't compete with the commissioner. But I'll quickly breeze a little bit more. And I do want to let everyone know too that whatever is being mentioned today, this is not the end all be all. There are still mechanisms that we're working on putting in place to ensure that there's continuous change that's going to happen when it comes to policing in New York City. So I don't want people to think that this is just it. So I will also note that. Something else that was also, brought up was the creating of ending of poverty to the prison pipeline initiative to prevent and reduce justice system contact and connect low income and justice involved clients to their families, streamlining services. Also issuing a mayoral executive order requiring city agencies to establish service plans to ensure health and human services for individuals and families who are impacted by criminal justice system. We want to really give them the level of support that they need and require. So that's definitely been a focus. Expanding summer youth. I know that this has been something that was brought up a lot by people. They really want to see more proactive measures being taken, not reactive measures. So this kind of speaks to that. And this is something that everyone was saying, we don't want resources being taken away from it. We want to see more going to it because we know that our youth really need it. So this is definitely something that has been a huge focus and ask of the community in a large way. Also, funding for a pilot program for families with children who are at risk of homelessness with the goal of reaching them before their housing situation reaches a point of crisis. Because when you have a stable home, you can then, do things and carry things out in a more thoughtful way. It's easier for you to do that because you don't have to worry about where you're going to lay your head out at night, when you're going to sleep. So that's definitely been another focus. And I think I am attempting to go through this slide, but I do believe that we are almost done. And I appreciate you all for my patience with navigating this technology as well. Next time I come, we'll have the technology down packed also. But the very, very last piece is the building of a culture that definitely encourages the use of coping mechanism tools for officers to address trauma, because something that was also brought up was, yes, we know we want NYPD to make a lot of these changes. We want policing to change, but we also know that their health, their well-being also needs to be addressed as well, because holistic individual is an individual that's most likely to be able to carry things out in the best possible way. So that was also another focus. Also reviewing the patrol guide to make it more user-friendly so that anyone can just look at it, understand it, and navigate it was also brought up as well. And then reforming the promotions process to focus on a more transparent method, including complaints and disciplinary history. That was something else that was brought up. And I know that the commissioner did delve a little bit into some of what the changes that are going to be happening around community having more of an input in deciding who some of their local COs are, commanding officers are in the community. So I know that that was something else that was also brought up that the community really did want to have a hand in and wanted to see change in. And I know a lot of our local electeds here also mentioned that. And then last but not least, the issuing of a mayoral executive order to ensure that a diverse candidate pool is considered for top NYPD promotions. So that kind of delves a little bit more into what I just mentioned prior. But I will say that the draft reports, the initial 2 reports that were mentioned and shared with the community on a larger level are on the website, nyc.gov/police reform, for you to check out and see. And also the city council resolution on that reform plan is also available for everyone to check out and see. And this, once again, as I mentioned before, this document that I quickly breezed through today is going to be shared with the Borough President's Office so that they can then in turn share it with all of you to make sure that you have this information readily available in a more appeasable way. So sorry I had to go so fast, but I had to, try to maximize my time as much as possible because, the commission did eat up into a little bit of my time, but I do appreciate you nonetheless for having us here. And I do appreciate a lot of the community. I shouldn't say we appreciate a lot of the community for your input and insight thus far, and don't think that this is the end. I've been telling people that big time, there's still more to do. And we're trying to put processes in place for people to really engage proactively in that process, in the continued process.
Thank you so much. All right, any questions for her? Maybe 1 or 2?
I can take one because I really have to go, but yes.
So we're going to take 1.
Okay.
Any questions? I don't think I saw any hands raised. Raise your hand if you do. I do just want to mention, and it's something that is not mentioned in here, the whole way CompStat is run. And I think it puts undue pressure on many inspectors and I'm not saying the police commissioners should not have conversations about crime on an individual basis with precincts. That's not what I'm saying. But the way it's done at this moment, in a public facing way, I think it takes away, or I think you may have some inspectors who may walk away feeling more embarrassed coming out of those meetings And then when they come back in the communities, they respond based on the emotions from that meeting that takes place. So it's something I want PD to take a look at as well. I have not spoken to Adrian about this as well. I'm not saying, once again, we should not review numbers, but I think there's a way for it to be done that doesn't weaponize CompStat as a way to go out into a community and be more aggressive to respond for the next CompStat. So it's something I'm going to be talking a whole lot more about, and I think you'll find a lot of inspectors in the police department will agree with me on this issue. So I just wanted to throw that out there, and I do my own polling because I have my own relationships, but it's something that we should take a look at as well.
Thank you for that typing and talking and writing down everything you're saying. Appreciate that.
I don't know if anybody else had questions. Yeah, I don't see any hands raised.
Okay.
All righty. So if you want to come back, maybe come back next month for and take some questions if people have it. But we'll get the presentation around to everybody as well. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me, everyone. Okay.
All righty, great. All right, now we're moving to the Department of City Planning. Oh, the joy. It seems like y'all are here every month. All righty. Welcome
but we
back.
still managed to miss your birthday somehow. So happy birthday, Borough President, and happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Good evening, City Council members and Community Board leaders. We appreciate your time this evening and the opportunity to present the proposal for zoning for accessibility. It's an important effort to advance our city's goal of system-wide accessibility for all New Yorkers. Many of you know me. I'm Alexis Wheeler, the Deputy Director of the Queens Office with the Department of City Planning. And I'm fortunate enough to be joined today by my colleagues from the department, Angela Balesio from our Transportation Division, Christopher Lee from the Zoning Division, and James Harris from our Intergovernmental Relations. And we also have our MTA partners here. They are our partners in creating this text. And so we're also very fortunate to have them joining us today. And they are Munsun Park, Luke DePalma, Howard Levine, and Lucille Songhai. Many of you will be getting a more focused briefing of this action with your respective boards in the coming weeks, but we're also glad that we have this time today to present the proposal. And so I will let Angela take it away.
Hi, I'm actually going to pass it right to Howie for the MTA to start the beginning of the presentation.
Thanks, Angela. I will take it. Good evening, everyone. Happy birthday, happy anniversary, Borough President. So Elevate Transit Zoning for Accessibility is what we're here to present. At a very high level, it is a zoning text amendment that's going to allow the MTA to work more efficiently with private developers to help achieve system-wide accessibility much more quickly across our entire system. The proposal includes two parts. The first is a system-wide transit easement requirement, and the second is an expanded transit bonus improvement in high-density areas, and we'll talk in more detail about those. Next slide. So to give more background, as many of you are surely aware, the MTA system is older. It was not built with accessibility in mind. Right now, only 136 out of 493 of our subway and Staten railway stations are currently accessible, which is about 28% of our system. For commuter railroads within the city limits, about 25 out of 39 stations are currently accessible. And of course, when we talk about accessibility and we make a station accessible, there's a whole suite of different things we do to a station. But with the zoning for accessibility proposal we're talking about tonight, we're really focused on vertical accessibility improvements to stations. Next slide, please. And so, there are many communities that will really benefit from improved elevator access across our system. People with mobility disabilities, parents with young children, seniors, and people with temporary injuries. For these communities, a subway ride, transit ride that could usually take just a few minutes can often take hours, be very circuitous because of the lack of elevators in accessible stations. Next slide. So we've made a historic commitment to accessibility at the MTA with our most recent capital plan. We've put more than $5 billion towards making 77 stations accessible within city limits. Once we've completed all of those station accessibility projects, 43% of the subway, serving over 60% of our ridership, would be fully accessible. And we'd achieve our goal of no subway rider being more than 2 stations away from an accessible station. Next slide. But even with this historic funding commitment, elevator construction is still extremely challenging. And it takes a long time because of a variety of factors, a number of which are listed here. And on the right, just, our narrow platforms. On the top right image, narrow sidewalks and limited clearance between particularly our elevated stations and buildings right next to them. There's really no space there to put an elevator to make a station accessible. And then particularly underground infrastructure. There's decades of highly complex infrastructure. Most of it is marked, some of it's not marked. And so we go to dig up a sidewalk to put in an elevator shaft, and we find some utility lines we weren't expecting at all, which adds a lot of time, a lot of funding to a project, and makes us that much farther away from system-wide accessibility. And of course, most of our stations need more than one elevator to be made fully accessible. Next slide. So currently, existing zoning regulations do help support transit improvements and accessibility improvements. Create new elevators and new entrances, help improve our street and sidewalk conditions by moving entrances off sidewalks, help create better configured stations, more direct accessible routes within our stations, and just overall speed up the delivery of accessibility and transit improvements. The image here on the right is of the 28th Street station in Manhattan, but you can see here on the left is a new elevator, on the right is a staircase, and both of these were made as part of the building being developed and have taken the entrance and elevator off of the sidewalk, allowing there to be more space for people to use the sidewalk and improve the general environment there. So unfortunately, while there are existing zoning regulations can really help us, there are some limitations. So two provisions. So the first is an easement provision. And an easement is what we showed in the previous slide, which is a space that was set aside for the MTA to build a access point, usually an elevator and a stair or some combination thereabout. And so with this easement provision, there's a requirement that the developer, if you're building adjacent to a subway or transit station, you have to talk to the MTA and see if we could use a part of the station, a part of your building and your building footprint to improve accessibility at the station. So this is an example at the 4th and 9th Street station in Brooklyn. You can see this brand new building going up right next to what is an elevated train platform serving the F and G trains. And because at the moment we don't have a citywide easement requirement, there was no opportunity for us to talk to the developer and use this space highlighted in this box to get space where it would have been the perfect spot for us to put an elevator right from the street level up to the subway platform, what is a really complicated station, and achieve accessibility much more easily, much more quickly. And so we're looking to avoid these missed opportunities across the city and across our system. And so right now, this easement provision only exists in very limited areas in Manhattan. There's no general framework for facilitating them outside of those limited areas. We're looking to expand this. So the second provision is our transit bonus mechanism. And a bonus mechanism or a transit bonus mechanism more specifically, is an incentive program that's voluntary that grants additional floor area for significant station improvements that are constructed by a developer as part of their building. Whereas with the easement, it's actually just a space that is set aside in the development, and the MTA will come back and build an improvement later. With the transit bonus mechanism, the developer actually builds the improvement themselves as they're building their building. So right now, this exists only in very limited central business districts in the city. You can see the blue dots here are stations that are eligible. They're in very limited parts of the city. In Queens, it was only a small number of stations in Long Island City that are able to use this. It's additionally also only available to developments that are adjacent or abutting the station. And the current application process adds a lot of time and risk to developers. And so even though this has been on the books for a number of decades, we've seen only very few stations and developers use this provision to help us benefit the subway system. So this leads us to zoning for accessibility, which is what we're here to talk about tonight, that hopefully helps us solve for some of those issues we've seen. And so I'm going to turn it over to DCP to go into more of the details of the proposal.
Thanks, Howie. Again, I'm Angela Blisio from the Department of City Planning. And so first, I just want to give you a really high level of how this impacts Queens. All the green dots on this map are stations in Queens where the easement provision that Howie was just talking about would be applicable. There are a few stations that are listed here on the left of stations that would not have an easement provision. And the three stations on the 7 line actually don't have any properties around them. They are in the median of Queens Boulevard. The 2 stations on the A line and all these stations on the Long Island Railroad are surrounded by either single family or 2-family houses, which are just sort of too low density to make an ask for an easement to be sort of a reasonable, or they might be surrounded, they might be just be a park space, which again it would not be applicable for an easement. And the bonuses that Howie was talking about would be available in community districts 1, 2, and 12, which is Long Island City sort of expanding in the high density areas of Long Island City and also in Jamaica. So I will give you some more technical details of how our proposal works. So as how I mentioned, the first component of the proposal is a system-wide easement requirement. And as part of this requirement, all developments and enlargements that are within 50 feet of a mass transit station, which essentially means adjacent to a station, and on zoning lots of at least 5,000 square feet, would be required to talk to the MTA and the chair of the City Planning Commission to see if an easement is required on that site. The districts that would be eligible for an easement are all residence districts that are above a sort of single family or 2-family housing. So anything above, we say R5 with a commercial overlay or RFID, but that's essentially anything that allows for a multifamily house. And there are equivalent commercial districts and then all manufacturing districts. And just to expand a little bit on what an easement actually is, this is a diagram of what we're talking about. This is a space that would house either an elevator or an elevator in with a stair or an elevator and a fairway. And so they sort of vary in what kind of size they are, depending on the circumstances of the station and also sort of the size of the building that's adjacent and what is sort of a reasonable combination. And in order to sort of accommodate these spaces, we are also in our proposal have a list of sort of zoning relief. So this would allow some sort of flexibility in the building of the development around the easement to accommodate the space that the easement has taken up. And this includes things like a little bit of extra height in case the space of the easement needs to be sort of accommodated on the top of the building, some parking relief in case the easement is in a place where there is some required parking, and also one other element of relief is temporary uses. And so I've added one more slide sort of just specifically talking about the temporary use provisions, because there will be a time between when the easement is provided and when the MTA improves that space. And so in order to activate that space, one of the elements of the proposal is temporary use in that space. And this would be a provision to allow non-residential uses to use that space in the time between the easement is provided and it is improved with an elevator. So the second part of our proposal is an expanded transit easement program, as Howie mentioned. And this would allow up to, this is an optional provision that would allow an increase of up to 20% of the floor area of the size of the building in exchange for a significant improvement in the transit station. And what makes this different than transit bonus program that exists today is it would be applicable to more zoning districts than are currently in our zoning resolution today. Today, transit bonuses are only applicable to commercial districts, high resident, and this would expand it to high, very high density residential, R9 and R10 in our zoning parlance. Their commercial equivalents and the highest manufacturing districts. And additionally, we are proposing that you don't have to be directly adjacent to a transit station in order to apply for the bonus. So you could be up to 500 feet from a transit station if you are in an R9 or an R10. In order to apply for a bonus to your closest station, or if you're in the highest density areas of Long Island City and Jamaica, you could be, or of Long Island City, you could be within 1,500 feet of the subway station. So if you're in the CBD of Long Island City, you could be even farther from a station in order to improve it. And so we think this will, allow more properties to be able to take advantage of this bonus, which will allow, more improvements to stations all around. And sort of what, when we say a significant improvement, the question is, what does that even mean? And so we're, this is a little bit trying to describe that. It has to be sort of a commensurate improvement. It has to be an elevator, or a significant entrance. If it's a station that already has an elevator, an actual entrance space. For a non-accessible station, the first improvement would have to be a vertical accessibility improvement. It would have to start with an elevator if you are at a station that is non-accessible. And so again, this is just sort of explaining what we mean when we say, not immediately adjacent. So we're looking at sites that are within 500 feet of a station or 1,500 feet of a station in the highest density CBDs. And so this is a pretty high level summary of the two parts of the proposal that I can leave on the screen for a minute while we go to questions. That's the conclusion of our formal slides. But I also have a couple of slides of the CBDs where the bonus would be applicable in the Community District 1 and in Community District 2 and in Community District 12. And I also can jump back to where easements would apply if you want to go back to the Queens map, if you want to sort of talk about how this actually impacts you. So I think with that, I will open it up to questions. And yeah, so yes, we would love to hear.
Great. So let me start by saying, and I think this is a question that I raised and I'm still interested in hearing the answer on, how do you define, what a developer is actually, how much money or what is considered substantial enough for them to actually put money into a project. So I just want to hear a little bit more about the definition, and then also just on process, if you can speak through process again, because the special permit would be controlled by DCP, I think if my memory serves me correct. And, we're gonna want, I don't believe in bypassing community boards or bypassing somewhat a EULA process almost. I think we should have a say so on these matters as well. So I just wanted to put that out there again. And I'm sure as this proposal makes its way to the council, that I have very similar questions. I'm assuming that I have on process and definition of this proposal. So I'll stop there. And then I see Dolores Orr from Chair of CB 14 has a question as well. So if you could answer those things, and then we'll go to Dolores. I think you're muted.
Yeah, I'll pass it to the MTA to talk about significant improvements, but I can begin to tackle process, and maybe Chris Lee jump in if I miss something. So there are two different parts of the proposal, the easement requirement and the transit bonus program, and they both have different processes. The easement requirement is a requirement. It would be a CPC chair certification, and it would require any property that is within 50 feet of a subway station to consult with the MTA to see if the MTA is interested in an easement. And that process would be done through the DOB, which would flag any station, any property that is within 50 feet of a station. It already is doing a very similar process of every property that's within 200 feet. So that's sort of an established thing that the DOB is already consulting with the MTA about. But so the DOB would flag a property. They would go to the MTA. If the MTA says, no, we're not interested in an easement, that's not helpful for us, there would be a sign off. That would be the end of the scenario. If the MTA is interested in an easement on their property, there would be a conversation between the MTA and the chair of the CPC and the developer to determine what that actually entails. And so that is the easement provision. The bonus program, which is an optional program, would be an authorization. So it would not, currently the bonus program is a special permit. So it goes to both the city council and the CPC. And we are proposing to change it to an authorization. So it would not have to go to the city council for a vote, but would just get a vote by the City Planning Commission. That process would continue to go through the community boards. It would continue to get a public review with it, because that is a much more significant improvement. And yes, so that is how those two processes are different. And anyone else from City Planning, can you chime in if I've missed something? And if not, I can pass it off to the MTA to talk about how the way they would determine a significant improvement.
So hearing no other DCP chiming in terms of a significant station improvement that we're talking about, specifically with the bonus, it really depends on exactly what the needs are of the station and also exactly what the bonus looks like. There's some kind of discussion, some looking at, exactly a 20% bonus means different things on different buildings in terms of, how big a building is, necessarily how just the footprint of a building. And so the amount of improvement can definitely vary depending on the size of the bonus. And it's an up to 20% bonus. If, say, all we needed a station is a new staircase, we have some brand new elevators, we have, really great station circulation, we could use, one new staircase there that would help improve circulation during, peak times, say, then it might be a less than 20% bonus. It might be a 5%, a 10% generally. But if it's a station that has a lot of needs, we look to, have it maybe be a 20% bonus, but look if it could be both an elevator from the mezzanine to the street, for a street level elevator, and then also an elevator from the mezzanine to the platform, for example, to make the whole station accessible with just, one bonus, if that's something that would be possible. So it really depends on station needs and site specific needs of the development, but generally we're trying to get as much improvement as we possibly can.
Hi, everyone. This is Chris Lee from the Zoning Division, Department of City Planning. I also want to add that these bonus applications will be subject to specific findings that the commission must see before they grant or authorize any sort of increase in floor area. So one of it is whether the improvements will generate some kind of public benefit. And the amount of floor area being generated through the application will have to be commensurate with the amount of public benefit that the improvements will provide. And that's very much a qualitative assessment. As Howie mentioned, it's a case-by-case basis. It really depends on the station needs. It depends on the size of the development that's occurring. There are also other findings, and this is very much consistent with the current bonus application right now, or special permit, where they must also find that the improvements will provide significant upgrades to either capacity, accessibility, or the general environment of the station, or a combination of all. So,
Thank you. Thank you for that. All right, we'll go to Chair Orr, followed by Herb Bratton, and then Della.
Thank you, Borough President. So I want to say 15 years ago, Auburn, maybe it's longer, Auburn by the Sea offered to build elevators at 67th Street, and the MTA turned them down. And they were looking for nothing in return. And so they had the foresight of what the future needed to be, and nobody took them up on it. In terms of, you said no more than 2 stations in terms of accessibility. And I guess it's the mindset of Manhattan, 2 stations. In parts of Queens, 2 stations, one station to the next could be a mile or more. So if you're saying it's at least every 2, somebody could have to walk 2 miles to get to an elevator, or across the bay to get to an elevator. Stepping outside of Manhattanville, for the boroughs, the outer boroughs, is 2 stations reasonable? And when there's a greater distance?
Sure, I can take that. So generally, that is kind of the minimum standard we're looking for across the system as part of our most recent, our 20 to 24 capital plan, but absolutely understood that there are different circumstances all over the city where 2 stations means something very different. If it's going under a river, if it's going across a bay, that's a very different circumstance. So that's something that we definitely look at when we're looking at which stations we will make accessible in a capital plan, and we'll continue to do that going forward. Of course, the goal here is just to get us to every station is accessible as quickly as possible, by working more efficiently with developers. I apologize, I don't know the history of the Beach 67th station. I can say it is scheduled to get to become accessible under this current capital plan, but I can't comment on the history. But generally, this program is really trying to use any mechanisms possible to get us to system-wide accessibility to complement our capital plan, which we've seen can be kind of vulnerable given what's happened over the last year, and get us to system-wide accessibility as quickly as possible.
And then just one other comment on the R9 and R10 district. That excludes many parts of Queens. And so there are certainly, we know in Rockaway, there's tremendous development. And while it's not, and we don't want R9 and R10, I'm sure we will exceed the density of R9 or R10 districts with some of our projects because they're not vertical, but more horizontal. So is there any consideration to the outer boroughs in how building can be different, but equally dense in consideration for developers?
So I don't know if DCP wants to comment on building density calculations. I can't comment on that, but I can speak more generally that generally the reason the bonus is limited to R9 and R10 is because that's where a 20% bonus would kind of help offset the cost of an MTA improvement like an elevator. It's not really the case necessarily in most places across the city that a 20% bonus would cover that cost. And if that were the case, then we'd see applications, I'd like to use this program, but I need a bonus of 30%, 40%, higher. And that's what we want to avoid. We don't want to have this process where there's developers looking to have these kind of out of scale developments and these bonuses, for a good reason for transit accessibility. But then we have this, do we have transit accessibility or do we have a very large out of scale development in some part of the city?
Well, we do have out of scale development in Rockaway, and we want accessibility. So the outer boroughs obviously will be left out of it. Thank you.
And Dolores, we do appreciate that you're responding to the fact that there are a number of large scale developments. That is certainly different from how we read density, but also where we are seeing development in the Rockaways, it still primarily relies upon housing subsidy. And so we also wouldn't want to see our scarce housing subsidy resources going towards the cost of capital improvements. And so if anything, it's probably a better thing that we see some of the higher density developments being paid for by developers. So that way the capital funds that we do have can be channeled towards other stations that require improvements.
So then I would read that to be market rate developers can provide better accessibility to their communities, but affordable rate developers have no way of giving us that equal opportunity.
I would instead look at it as there are different opportunity areas where developers can help put some money into the coffers and get these improvements realized. But yes, the market is not created equal all across the city. And so this is where we need the capital reserves that are in place and will be in place in the future to then be channeled towards other locations.
Yeah, and then I just wanted to add to that point, because that, last I checked, we have the American Disabilities Act, and the MTA has been out of compliance with that law for a very long time. And I don't think that this proposal should preclude or exclude the MTA and the city from looking at these areas, as we've always pointed out. Arvin East Peninsula Hospital redevelopment out in CB 14 provides a real opportunity for an upgrade to an elevator, under the L. But I'm just hoping the city is not evading, and the state is not evading their responsibility to provide elevators for these communities because they're not getting market rate housing. So I would hope as this proposal progresses that we also are seeing where the MTA's priorities lie as well, in terms of making sure that these communities also have access to an elevator as well. So I just wanted to put that out there. And last I checked, we're going to have God willing, a stimulus package coming down, God willing, which will be helpful towards investing in transportation. So I'm hoping that as this money comes down, God willing, when that passes, that we will see these areas prioritized as well, where we're seeing a lot more development, including affordable.
And if I can just respond, I know we've touched on a number of points here, but generally this proposal, is not aiming to create development. We're trying to harness existing development. We're not trying to incentivize or create these programs that will lead to more development across the city. That's kind of happening on its own. But generally, the MTA, as we talked about at the top of your question, Chair, or, no rider more than 2 stations away. That's our current capital plan. Our next capital plan, we hope to have an even more ambitious goal, in terms of accessibility across the system. And so as we, get improvements in some of these bonus areas, we're going to be using our capital program and targeting stations that are not, in the bonus areas. Even our current capital plan right now that was created before this program was created, or really this proposal laid out as it is, only 14 of our 70 New York City Transit subway stations that are in our current plan to be made accessible are in that bonus area. The majority are not in places that will see these improvements built by developers. And so we'll continue to kind of use the capital plan to ensure that every part of our system is treated, equally and has accessibility, given that funding and the different means that we'll have to see accessibility at our different stations. And just, additionally with the easements, those are going to be incredibly important, incredibly helpful for us to make those stations accessible. And we're working right now with HPD on 2 stations along the L, not in Queens, I will admit, but to get easements through, voluntary mechanisms that they're using right now. And so we hope to do that in the future and continue our relationship with developments that are adjacent to the stations.
Thank you. All right, we'll go to Betty.
Thank you, Mr. Borough President. I'd like to pretty much say ditto to what Dolores said. When Resorts World was being built, they built an accessible elevator to the existing northbound side of the station. They were willing to work with MTA to develop the southbound side and ran into a whole slew of roadblocks in a sense. That's one concern, how we will work with the private developers to get accessibility, because that would then make that station a fully accessible station. The other question I have is on the city planning map, and I made just because it was small, among the little dots that were included in the easement zone were already existing stations that are fully accessible. For example, I saw the Howard Beach station there, which, if there's going to be required another process with DOB, when a developer wants to do something across the street from that station, and it's not 50 feet from the door of that station to the first store across the street, is that going to add to a developer's expense to essentially then down the road be told, no, you don't have to do anything, we don't want it? But why those stations that are already fully accessible are included?
Sure. So I can speak to that. So the easement provision is not, only for accessibility, but also for just increasing overall circulation and station environment improvements. And so in a station that's already accessible, we could install redundant elevators if that's something that is needed or desired. We can also install a new staircase, where it's a really tight station right now. At rush hours, it's very crowded, and a new staircase would provide much needed, circulation help. And there's other things we can do, but those are generally the main ones. And so, in terms of the mechanism for getting these easements and for developers, if they go to submit building plans and they're within right now, under just existing provisions, if they're within 200 feet of any MTA infrastructure, DOB flags that proposal for them to come talk to us. And this continues just to make sure there's nothing that they're accidentally going to touch or change with their development. Usually that's not the case. It's totally fine. They talk to us, we say there's no issue, and we go on our merry way. With this easement, similarly, it's within 50 feet of a station envelope, not just the bottom of the staircase, but a station envelope. So as you outlined, it might be a little more than 50 feet from the door of the station. And DOB will flag their applications. They'll talk to us, they'll talk to DECP. We have 60 days to respond. There's a time limit. If we don't respond, then we don't get an easement even if we wanted one. And that is to keep developers able to build and not delay them. And so we have that clock on us to keep us on our ready and responding. And if we don't want an easement, because for example, it might just be a building that's too far away, it's not something we can really use to help improve the station, we'll certify that, and again, we'll go on our merry ways. But if we do want an easement, then we'll have more of a discussion about what the easement will look like, what size, shape it'll take, what part of the building, And then we'll talk about zoning relief, which Angela outlined, and what kind of changes we can help them make to their building that will help offset the space that we're going to be using for an easement in the future. And so it's not anything to make it more difficult. It is, I admit it is another process that you might need to go to if you are really close to a subway station or a transit station. But, we're doing what we can to, depending on the zoning, depending on the building, to make sure that, a developer is made whole, is not losing out in any way by having an easement.
Howie, if I could just add a few points to that. Hi, I'm Moon Sun Park. I'm with the MTA. We expect that the majority of developers, when they come to us through this easement requirement, we will say, we do not need to take an easement on your property. We do not need an easement. And we do expect the majority of that to happen. The impetus behind this citywide easement requirement is because we have seen a number of missed opportunities where we could have gotten an easement, such as in that slide. And because we couldn't, we are now in a position where we have to put an elevator in a much more less ideal location, which ends up being much more expensive and also ends up resulting in a much more circuitous path. And having an easement certainly would have helped us in many situations. And that was the impetus behind this proposal.
Thank you.
Okay, we now will go to, Lisa, did we hear from you yet?
No, I just,
Okay, Lisa.
I hope it's, thank you very much for President. I hope, well, I mean, this is going to directly apply to our community board in Long Island City and to so much of the new development that's happening there. So one question, when they built the Citibank building, there was many years before the elevators were built. And so how are you going to handle the financial benefit to the developer and the time between the building is built and any kind of improvement is done? And, if you have side-by-side developers, are you going to consider them for, a larger zoning benefit so they can, in a comprehensive way, address some of the improvements that are needed? I guess that's the question.
Sure. So I'll take the first part, then I'm going to ask for a clarification on the second. So, so in terms of, I'm sorry, I'm just blank. What was the first part of your question, Lisa?
The first part is the time lag.
Yes, got it. Thank you.
The time a building is built and improvement is completed. Mm-hmm. And, there's tremendous benefit to a developer in that time frame. And so how are you dealing with that?
So so two parts. It's different for the bonus versus the easement. So with the bonus, where a developer is getting up to a 20% floor area bonus, it is a significant improvement, and it's exchanged for a significant improvement for the MTA. And so before the developer is able to have a certificate of occupancy for the bonus area on their building, that extra 20% of their building, they won't be able to occupy until the MTA certifies that the public improvement, the significant station improvement, has been completed and is usable by the public. So that is really a big, kind of ability we have to keep those bonus developers to actually follow through and to build the public improvement. And there's no way they can really get away without doing that and still use their building, at least the bonus pieces of it. With the easement, so a building will set aside that space for the easement, and then the MTA will come in later and build the elevator, the staircase, whatever it may be. And in that case, there may be some time between the easement being built and the MTA building the improvement. And so, that just depends on kind of MTA financing, where that easement fits into our overall accessibility needs. For example, if it's a station that, the station's right one before it, one after it, and they're very close, are already accessible, you know, it might not be the top priority to build that elevator before a station that's in a more isolated area with no accessible stations around it. But so that depends on exactly the station. It's very station specific in terms of the easement.
Yeah, no, I understand that. But I mean, there's so much adjacent development, you know, and we're talking a lot about comprehensive planning and, you know, and there's so many, I mean, if 3 developers who had adjacent projects next to each other all contributed to significant improvements in that neighborhood in terms of accessibility, is that something that's under consideration? Or are you looking at this as one building, you know, not in a comprehensive way?
Sure. So generally, you know, we have comprehensive kind of plans for our stations in terms of what we need there, in terms of both accessibility and circulation improvement. So we kind of have that in mind when we're thinking about a station overall. But if there are, you know, 3 different developers who all come to us and say, you know, we'd like to use this bonus, what can we do at the station to help make improvements and get this bonus? Then we kind of take a look and see, you know, what size of the zoning lots, how much is a 20% bonus for them, you know, et cetera, or, you know, is there actually we really need only one elevator, which only one building really needs to cover. And then we look at, you know, kind of which building would potentially be the best for our customers. So for example, if there is you know, one of those 3 buildings is adjacent to the station and 2 aren't because we've, you know, widened it to that 500 feet radius, we'd probably end up going with that one because they could build the elevator right into the footprint of their building and have it be off of the sidewalk and improve the overall street environment compared to the other 2, which might be 500 feet away. And so if they were building that same elevator, it would be on the sidewalk outside of their development. And so that, for example, would be something we'd prioritize when looking at 3 kind of similar proposals. But it's possible, you know, we could have, you know, improvements built by multiple developers in the same station, depending on exactly the needs of the station and the buildings as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll go to Chair Block and then followed by Block. The last question will come from Thorpe McKee.
All right, good evening. Thank you, Borough President. I know there's no construction going along these areas, and there's nothing been happening but easements, but I'd be remiss if I don't ask about the Laurelton Long Island Station and the Rosedale Station with regards to accessibility. I'm just putting it out there. I know stimulus money, you mentioned that, Borough President, coming down. Is there any plans for those 2 stations to receive accessibility facilities?
Sure. So
I'm putting it out there, you know, to MTA.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, Chair Block, I don't know. I am with New York City Transit and don't handle the railroads. So I don't know right now. But I really just don't know is my honest answer. So I'd have to get back to you.
We'll bring Phil Ng on another time from the LA.
Thank you, Mr. Borough President, really, because there's nothing there at those 2 stations, and that's within, I know Queens Village, Rosedale, and Laurelton are within the Community Board 13. Queens Village is handicap accessible. Laurelton's not, and I believe Rosedale's not. And if you're going to bring MTA Chairman and Ng in, greatly appreciate it, Mr. Borough President, to discuss this further.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Talk about all the stations, but yes, that too. All right, Princess Thorpe McKee, Reverend McKee.
Yes, can they put up the slide again for Community Board 12?
Do you see it?
Yes, thank you.
All right, and we'll make sure everybody gets a copy of this presentation too. You have a question for them on it?
No, I just needed to screenshot it so I could take a better look at it later.
Okay, yeah, we'll send all of these presentations around as well.
Okay.
Let me just add that one of the things that, you know, we raised with the MTA as well is, and we're very appreciative of finally addressing handicap accessibility period. We need to also hear about service and service improvements for the borough. So I'm hoping we'll be able to talk more about that as we move forward too. Don't all talk at once. MTA? Did they?
I was gonna say, I wasn't sure if you wanted a response, Borough President.
Yeah, of course.
Of course.
Better
So
service
with,
to Queens.
yeah, of course. And we always want to provide better service to our customers in any way we can. And we do think that accessibility at our stations is a huge win. And we can't wait to have a fully accessible system. Understand that, you know, operational improvements and train service improvements are also always desired. And we are making improvements, for example, computer-based train control on the Queens Boulevard line right now is something we're working on. But in terms of this proposal specifically, it's difficult for us to use kind of the capital, you know, for example, a zoning bonus that a building might receive. You know, there's no kind of cash changing hands as part of these developments that then we could put into, you know, kind of improving train service. And in general, train service is quite expensive and it, you know, it is ongoing, whereas these improvements, these are capital improvements to our stations that are kind of one-time expenses that we're expecting to get from these developments and not kind of recurring, you know, income or benefit that's going to be flowing in. And so that's why they're really focused on the capital improvements to our stations and with accessibility particularly as a focus in mind. So.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, but once again, there's an infrastructure bill coming down. We have congestion pricing coming, and Queens needs to get its fair share of this money. So I just wanted to put that out there as well, because what good is getting an elevator if you're not going to have access to a running train as well, when you have to sit on the platform for 15 or 20 minutes, like many people do for the A train and other lines. So I just want to throw that out there, that I think we should be talking about complementing, you know, not just doing one and that's it, but really strategically thinking about how we can do both. So I know that's out of your range, but just, I have to put that out there. So, all right. All righty, with that being said, it has been one heck of a borough board meeting tonight, and I know there's a lot to take in. We'll send around these presentations. The staff will do that. I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank Khalil Bragg for getting the police commissioner here today, and also the mayor's office of gun violence. I think I might have chopped that up. And then also wanted to thank the rest of the staff, Irving Poi for working with city planning and everybody. So we look forward to continuing to review these proposals and looking forward to continued conversations on them. So thank you all for attending. Hope you got some good information tonight. And I urge everybody as I close out to get vaccinated. If you are not vaccinated and you're eligible, please go and get vaccinated. I got my first shot. I'm doing okay. I'm still here. I got my second one Saturday. Frank Joseph, he's not showing his face. He got the Johnson & Johnson shot, but I think he's okay. He's at the office today. Or are you home now? He was at the office.
Now I'm home, but I was at the office and I'm doing okay. You're right.
All right. You know, he didn't turn green. So it's a shot. All right. Thank you all.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.